You know, we have been, I don't know for how many years now, giving sermons every week, having the Understanding Watch programs almost every week. And sometimes you wonder, what's the result? Well, I will talk a little bit about these concerns today to you. Hopefully you are listening carefully. Hopefully I'm getting through. Those of you who are listening in right now, those of you who are going to listen at it later. Because sometimes I wonder, are we getting through? And I feel I'm in pretty good company, because that's what Mr. Armstrong has been wondering a long, long time. They're not getting it, he would say. They're not getting it. And he would say, oh, no, Mr. Armstrong, they are getting it. And he would say, no, they're not getting it. And how right was he? Today I will say a few things, and I hope I am getting through to you, and you will be getting them. Because we may not have that much time left, and we most certainly don't have the time to kid ourselves. First, let me talk to you about the update, which you have all received, number 932. In the update, I'd like to start with the editorial, which was written by Paul Niehoff in Australia, entitled People of the Truth. And that gets us right into the topic of what I want to talk about today. He starts his editorial by saying, many years ago I read a book entitled People of the Lie, written by a psychiatrist. It's a book describing some people as being inherently evil as a way of life. The author points out that it is not just about doing evil things or sinning, which we all do, but being evil. Being evil without even and ever acknowledging it. They may appear to be model citizens, hard workers, active in neighborhood activities, but in their private life or family life, they may be continually evil. The author compared them with the biblical Pharisees. And then Mr. Niehoff goes on in his editorial to explain what it means to be people of the truth and people of evil. You might want to read that editorial. I want to jump to the current events. And we say in here in the summary that we begin with extremely unsettling events in California, threatening Christian churches and our religious freedom and liberty. And of course, in this context, please view our new Standing Watch program titled California's Ongoing Persecution of Churches. And I just want to jump to the work section where we give a summary, and we give the summary as follows. Unconstitutional governmental restrictions in California pertaining to church services are violating our religious liberties and freedoms and oppose the commands and injunctions of Almighty God. Some politicians, church members, and faith leaders are decrying Governor Kevin Newsom's ban on singing in houses of worship, while others don't seem to understand or are puzzled and confused. So what are Christians supposed to do? You might want to listen to this program carefully, because maybe you are puzzled and confused. Maybe you are listening to your church leaders in your churches telling you something which is different from and opposed to what God is telling you in the Bible. Do you know what the Bible has to say about church services? And how much are you willing to compromise, to be afraid, to be perhaps spineless, without backbone? And then when the mark of the beast is going to be imposed on you, are you then willing to oppose that? Or are you like the proverbial frog who is in that water getting hotter and hotter, and you don't even see anymore what your responsibilities are? We go on to say in our summary of the current events that we continue with an article predicting civil war in the United States. I want to read this article to you. It was actually linked by the Drudge Report on July 7. And the author is saying, in my view, it is clear that the political left has gone off the rails into its own cultism, that there is no coming back. There can be no reconciliation between the two sides, so we must separate or we must fight. War is probably inevitable. The political left is a tool for a greater agenda. They are being used as a weapon of chaos by globalist interests. A little later he says, a civil war that will tear America apart. When the left comes for us, and they will, and he doesn't define who us actually is, the fight has to be won by us, not the government. We cannot hand even more power to government in the name of security. We cannot become the fascists the leftists accuse us of being. Furthermore, I am not convinced that there will be even an election in November. With pandemic lockdowns surely returning as infections spike once again, but I have to talk about the alleged spike in a moment. He goes on to say, voting in a traditional fashion will be difficult or restricted in some states, and mail-in or digital ballots will not be accepted by most conservatives because of their history of being used to rig election outcomes. In that context, you might have read about this article where a dead cat has received a form, an application for voting by the mail. I'm not kidding you. A dead cat. I wonder what that dead cat is voting for. He goes on to say here, if Trump wins or delays the election, the left will riot and civil war will be triggered. Conservatives will have to deal with the violence of the left while also dealing with the potential for martial law, which we cannot tolerate or support either. If Trump is still in the White House in 2021, get ready to fight back against leftist mobs as well as martial law measures. If Biden enters the White House, which again we don't believe he will, but this author says, if Biden enters the White House, expect him to immediately implement unconstitutional policies, including medical tyranny, gun confiscation, and martial law. Either way, it ends in war. Do you realize what that means? That we might very well see civil war in this country very soon. Where are you going to be when that happens? Are you again buckling? Too afraid to stand up for what is right in the eyes of God? We also say in our summary of the current events that we speak on terrible consequences of governmental conduct regarding the coronavirus in, amongst others, Australia. I'd like to go to an article which we have published about Australia. Australia is closing their borders. Did you know that? They're closing their borders. This was published on July 4 by Reuters. But I'd like to read to you from a report we got from Mr. Paul Niehoff. So he got double mentioning today. That's what he wrote us. Starting from tomorrow night, all of Melbourne goes into 6 weeks of lockdown again. We can only go out for shopping, work if unable to work from home, exercise and medical reasons. Food must be takeaway. Fortunately, masks are not necessary. Panic buying has begun again, even though there is absolutely no shortage of food or toilet paper. This time we can go fishing, boating and surfing and even play golf or tennis, but must not go to regional Victoria. We are not allowed to have visitors, but intimate partners are allowed to visit, which is interesting. We still hope to attend the feast, but at the moment it is wait and see. And then he goes on to say, as for the country, mostly only Australian citizens are allowed to come here, and on arrival they must go into hotel quarantine for 14 days at government expense. That's Australia. When it comes to Canada, Mr. Messier told me that as of now, nobody can leave the country. And the idea is like, it won't change until the beginning of next year, which means where are they going to go when it comes to the feast? When it comes to Germany, the same situation. Still a travel ban for people going to Germany or people coming from Germany. So we still don't know what we are going to do when it comes to the German feast site. Do you see how satanic all of this is? Do you see that Satan is the author of all of this, including the governmental restrictions? Depending on how you look at it, you should understand it is Satan's attempt to prevent us from keeping the feast. I think many members are blind when it comes to that realization. Talking about the coronavirus. Now some ask, why do I even have to talk about this? Well, I am talking about it because when it came to the situation in worldwide, and when people came in, and when they tried to do away with the truth, many ministers, just about almost all ministers, were afraid to speak out, to stand up, to speak out. And most members were later complaining, those who understood the truth, well, how come the ministers didn't speak out? It's the minister's fault. We followed them blindly. Well, at this time I wasn't a minister, even though I did speak out and I did write memos as much as I could. But now I am a minister. I am an evangelist in God's church, and I have a duty to speak out and to tell you the truth. And so here's an article which we published because you don't find these kind of articles in the mainstream left-wing radical mass media. This is written by Dr. Ron Paul, and he has an institute going, the Ron Paul Institute. Now he is a very prominent and well-known politician, if you please, but I'm looking at him as a doctor. And he pointed out in this article that there is a lot of talk about a second spike. And he specifically talks about Texas there, and he quotes a judge saying that the judge pointed out that the definition was suddenly changed to count probable cases as cases. And at the same time, the threshold of determining probable was lowered to a ridiculous level. He said, it's remarkable how low the standard is now. Even worse, once a probable case was determined based on possibly unrelated subjective criteria, up to 15 people in possible contact with that probable case were also listed as probable case. And probable cases were considered cases. Repeat that farce across Texas, and it's no wonder there was a spike in cases. And then he goes on to say the second wave is driven by propaganda. Across the country, COVID testing increased from about 150,000 to more than 700,000 per day. Last week, Reuters reported that tests shipped around the country by the federal government were contaminated. Then he says this: deaths from coronavirus, even the death with coronavirus, rather than deaths from coronavirus, are down more than 90% since the peak in April. Have you heard that recently? You hear just the opposite, the absolute opposite. Down by 90%, he is saying. The decline in death continues. That means we are closer to the herd immunity that will finally kill the virus. That's not what you're hearing on CNN, on NBC, MSNBC, ABC, not even on Fox News. Now, some are still speaking up on Fox News. You know, a German doctor today, prominent doctor in Germany, was telling us and the world it will at least take 10 years until people are becoming immune from the virus. How much more nonsense can you tolerate? Talking about hypocrisy. Let's talk about hypocrisy. You've heard about the attack on beloved Western movie star John Wayne, right? I mean, you heard about, oh, this was a terrible man, an evil man, a racist. Well, we have an article in here in defense of John Wayne. I recommend you read that, to get the other side of the story. But also, listen to this nonsense. The Daily Mail wrote on July 4 that the term master bedroom will no longer be used by dozens of estate agents in England due to its allusions to sexism and slavery. So they want to use primary or principal bedroom instead. Not only that, according to Express, the famous fictional detective Sherlock Holmes has been denounced as a racist. And they're asking now, is his statutes, what they have over there, are they going to be toppled? I want to tell you a little bit more about hypocrisy. Because the standing watch I did on what's happening in California, it's not just only happening in California, it's happening throughout the United States. In many cases, states which are run by Democrat governors, but in some states now run by those who are Republicans, Republican governors, who are equally spineless and follow the propaganda. But Germany is no exception. And here's an article having to do with the annexation, the planned annexation, by the Jerusalem Post. And that's what they wrote on July the 4th. The mass circulation Bild, which is a German mass circulation paper, blasted the German parliament on Friday for its condemnation of the Jewish state for seeking to exercise sovereignty over disputed parts of the West Bank. Commentary on the decision against Israel's policy: "You treat friends differently," read the headline of the editorial by Louis Hagen. The Bundestag, the parliament, discussed internal borders in Israel. It is grotesque, because the outcome of the debate was already certain. The Bundestag presents Israel as a threat to stability in the Middle East. It warns that Israel's actions have significant effects on the peace process, wrote Hagen. What peace does Israel endanger? There is no peace in the Middle East that could be endangered, he added. As long as Hezbollah, Iran, Hamas, and all the other neighbors from Syria to Jordan want to more or less wipe the Jewish state off the map. As long as the quote-unquote moderate Palestinian government in the West Bank pays terrorists long or lifelong pensions. Article goes on to say. The editorial declared that, unfortunately, we only hear the voice of the German Bundestag when it comes to criticizing Israel. Human rights violations by the Palestinians in Iran and Syria and Egypt, one hears very little of that. We needed a clear commitment to our deep friendship and solidarity with the only democracy in the Middle East. What has now been declared is an embarrassing pretense and not a friendly act. Friends are treated differently, the editorial concluded. And then the article wrote, the Bundestag has not condemned Turkey for the occupation of North Cyprus, China for its occupation of Tibet, and Russia for the annexation of Crimea. And we make the following comment. Deep down inside, Germany is no supporter of Israel or the Jewish people, and it never has been. And that's what we got to understand. And that's why there is going to be a war where Israel will be defeated by the European unity under German leadership. The Q&A this week is the sixth part of a series, Why Was the Religious Establishment Usually at Odds with Jesus? And we say in there that we have, in previous installments, talked about the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, the elders, and the institution of the Sanhedrin. And this part now will be discussing additional influential groups at the time of Jesus, as spoken about in the Bible and also in archaeological and historical records, namely the Essenes, the Zealots, and, in passing, the tax collectors, the Herodians. And we point out in the article that when it comes to the Essenes, there is a lot of misconceptions about that group, and many have a wrong concept of them. When it comes to the Zealots, we should know about them because one of the disciples of Jesus was a Zealot. Now, what does that all have to do with anything? And then when it comes to the Herodians, the Herodians were more a political group than a religious group. But why were they so opposed to Jesus? For the same reasons that people are opposed to us in the church today. Those of us who are preaching the truth, who are preaching that it is wrong to vote in governmental elections, that it is wrong to serve on the jury, that it is wrong to join the military, to be taught how to fight in war. People don't like that. People didn't like Jesus for saying exactly the same thing in comparison if you look at what Jesus did stand up for and what he taught. When it comes to the work, we have a new booklet in German, which was already now posted last night on our website, and which is being sent to the printer for printing in Germany. And of course, it's a German version of our English booklet, Obeying God Rather Than Man. In German, man muss Gott mehr gehorchen als den Menschen. Many have no clue what that means. I would recommend everybody who's listening in, if you haven't listened or if you haven't read that booklet, please do so. You'll be surprised. You may be obeying man and violating God's commands without perhaps even realizing it, following the lead of those who are deceived and deceiving others. When it comes to the mail, that's another unfortunate side effect of the governmental restrictions to the coronavirus. The mail is awful. Absolutely, totally awful. Now we heard this week that the English booklets on obeying God rather than man have just arrived in Germany. I mean, I don't know how long they were being circulated. They have just arrived in Australia. They have just arrived in Canada. We are getting letters from Germany now, which have been sent on June 1. We were told that letters from Thailand to the United States would take 3 months to arrive. Great. You can thank those governmental agencies who are behind those restrictions, because that is what the reason is for those delays. Now, we have also posted a new German sermon, which is being listened to or was listened to today. The title in English would be, Will Russia Destroy Berlin? Provocative title, question. Berlin, the capital of Germany, will the Russians destroy it? What does the Bible say about it? The sermonette, presented by Michael Link, was also posted for the German audience, titled Mit beiden Füßen, or in English, Both Feet In. And then the sermonette from last Sabbath by Robert Moore, in English it would be The Family, Die Familie, was posted. And then we posted the sermonette by Eric Rank from last week, Do Your Best, and the sermon by Mr. Harris, Dave Harris, presented last Sabbath, titled Test Your Conversion. That one I want to give you the summary real quick, what that is about. If you haven't listened to it, please do so. He says, examine yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Don't you understand that Jesus Christ is in you? Unless, of course, you fail the test. Quoting 2 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 5. We shouldn't repeat the mistakes we've made in the past. We shouldn't just blindly follow those who are telling you to live a certain way if that is not in accordance with the Bible. I've seen how it happened in worldwide at the time. One little thing after the other. Until finally the truth was just completely destroyed. We shouldn't allow that to happen today. No matter in what church you might belong to or what church you might be attending, think what you're being told. And ask yourself the question, is that in accordance with God's law or not? And then make a conscientious decision. Don't be a dumb sheep just following the quote-unquote shepherd to the slaughter. We also say in our work section that the YouTube channel for the Church of the Eternal God presents vast videos for Standing Watch programs, along with sermonettes, sermons, and promotional videos. You should really look at those. And you should also look at our other international websites. We have one in English, in French, in Spanish, in German. Have you looked at those recently? And all the things which are being posted there? Or are you just not interested in what the work is doing? And to end on a positive note, I hope nothing of that what I've said was too negative. It was something for you to be aware of and to wake up if you're asleep. And that should be very positive too. But I received a memo from somebody I do not know. And he wrote this: Hello, Pastor Link, just a quick email to say thank you for the informative and Bible-based sermons and lectures you prepare for Christians everywhere. Evangelists like yourself make a great impact on people everywhere through God's directions. I want you to know we hear you. Whoever that person is, thank you very much. I hope many will hear us, many more than are doing it today, because the time is short, and it's not time to keep sleeping. It's time to wake up before it is too late.